ask for the consent this time. Because we thought that's because
right, yeah, it already signed in. So we're just waiting until after 1 o'clock to start the session. The session's supposed to start at 1, that's the start time, right?
Yes.
Not 1:15 or something.
No, 1.
Yeah, we ran out of time on the last session, so we'll try to pay more attention to time this time around.
Should it ask for my email address as well, or just my name? Oh, it did. Okay, I got it. It's fine. It did all the stuff it's supposed to.
Yeah, and if you signed up for the last session, it will already know.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
I got 6 new emails from you all. Cool. That means that some of you haven't done it yet. So I've been told that I tend to give my back to that part of the room. So you might want to try it over here. There's 3 chairs over here. And someone could sit in front of the laptop. That's fine. So let's yeah, so there's 3 chairs here. If people come in late, they should feel free to come up to the front. We were standing room only in the last session. So. Did everybody get to have lunch? That's nice. I'm in progress.
Yeah. Apparently, when we do our best, so I have their water.
Oh. Good. So if you haven't already, feel free to sign in using the text message option there. We'll be sending out an email with all the slides and the video. We're also live streaming right now for anybody at home.
Is that a special campus for that student, or would you be using it?
No, it's a webcam. It's just a nicer webcam. The thing that's distinctive about it is it's got one of the screws on the bottom, so you can put it on a tripod like that. Most webcams don't do that. That's like that takes on the top of your camera, but most webcams, this is the webcam. Watch my laptop. You need to do live streaming, you need a computer to serve in between the internet and the camera. So. You can do it on you can actually do it on most phones these days. Have everything you need to do a live stream. You just have the right software. You can just live stream straight. No, you have to have an internet connection. So, well, you might be able to make your computer pick up on that. And a lot of protests these days, people are using their cell phone with a live stream. A good way of, on the top is going to do something wrong. And they can't just steal your camera, right? Because it's already on the net before they got to it. So.
Watch out the other. I think I'm looking for cloud just so it's matching.
Software do you recommend?
Sorry?
What software do you recommend?
There's all sorts. I just look around and there's free ones, paid ones. Depends on what kind of phone you have. Off the top of my head, I can't think of that. But live streaming, that's the technology you're doing. They're all kind of. So I think my co-facilitator might have gotten stuck in a line. So I may just let him take a seat when he gets
When you started talking about Facebook, yes, everybody started Facebook. I was embarrassed to me. I thought of Facebook.
What I was talking about was on Facebook you can make a page for your organization. Yeah, you can make one for your organization. So it's not big, it's organization X. And then somebody runs that. Multiple people can run that page. So it's the organization. It is. It's the page on Facebook.
It's got a lot of content.
It can. Remember, there's that whole dynamic that Facebook doesn't want you to go to other places. And so it's a way of an organization having a place on Facebook that's about them without taking people outside of Facebook. And that, but it's also limited because it can only be in a certain, it has to look the way Facebook wants it to look. And you can't get the email addresses out of it very easily. So if Facebook chooses to just turn it off because they don't like the politics, then you're done.
I can use attachments, so maybe that's on email or Facebook or what.
Attachments usually what?
Well, show the diagram the same.
You really can't do attachments on. You can't really do attachments on Facebook. Facebook doesn't have attachments. It has. You can post pictures. Is that what you mean? Like by posting a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Posting pictures are definitely better than just writing text.
Yes.
People like pictures.
What do you call it? Not a thumbnail, but for we Africa so we illustrated.
It's a link. A link.
That's just a link.
So, yeah, my co-facilitator is not here. So, I think I'll have to get started without him, but I'm sure he's just in line getting food. Has everyone done the action here of signing in by sending a text message to that telephone number? If you were here this morning, you noticed that it's a different keyword, and it will probably not ask you for the questions it was asking this morning because it already knows. So this functionality is all being done out of Nation Builder, which is the platform that I work in. That I will be talking more about in session after this, if you're interested in how all this works. So you've sat in front of my laptop there.
Yes, I have a nice view of you.
Can I sit this low? Is it still? Yeah.
You're in the bottom 1/4 of the bottom 1/4
So I'll
of the
stand
screen.
up.
Your legs aren't in it.
All right, I'll sit down.
But we don't need to see your legs.
Well, I like to walk.
You are getting an unobstructed view of the screen.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh,
Was that a problem last time? How many folks are from the last session? Oh, okay. There's been a very good turnover, right? Okay. If you're new to this session and I start skipping over stuff, I've been talking for the last hour and a half about stuff, so I might assume that I've already told you to remind me if I'm forgetting to fill in the gaps. All right. I think I'll get started. Has everybody done this? I've only got 12 messages, so I don't know that you have.
I lost myself.
All right. Well, for the few folks who don't have a cell phone, you can just there's pads of paper. In fact, if they have been, if other folks grab them.
So is this to get copies of the slides?
To get the slides and the live in the video.
Is it possible to just give you an email address?
Yeah, just write it down. It's just this way is faster. You'll get it this weekend, as opposed to if you write it down, it'll wait for me to get back to my desk.
Okay, I don't have
That's okay. All right, so you are in the right place, if that's the flyer that you saw yesterday. We are doing digital skills for movement building. I am Ethan Clark, and I am from Campaign Gears. We're a consultancy group that helps progressive nonprofit organizations do campaigning better. Our motto is that we help you win. Charles, who just joined us here, if you want to grab a seat.
God damn, getting food is hard.
Getting the elevator is hard too. It is.
Introduce myself.
Yeah.
So my name is Charles Lynchmer. I've been active with various organizations, usually administrative, fundraising, stuff like that. So about 10 years ago, I got involved in the online side of things. And 5 or 6 years ago, we started Organizing 2.0 specifically to help the kinds of groups that are doing a terrible job online. Less true today than it was then. That includes unions, organizations of low-income people and marginalized groups. And we want to teach folks to use appropriate technology to get the best effects and impact they can.
So our agenda for today, and just like the last session, this is stacked pretty heavily, so we'll try to get through as much of this as we can. You'll get the slides if we don't get all the way through. So we're going to do some introductions. We're going to talk about this concept of the ladder of engagement. We're going to talk about a content calendar. Then we're going to talk about websites, email, Facebook. We might talk about advertising, depending on how much time we've got. Text messages, just to very briefly cover that technology, and video. Though we'll just very briefly talk about video, because we had a whole session on video for a minute as well. I should mention that this session has been sponsored by Unifor, the union, as well as Nation Builder, which is the platform that we'll be doing a session later this afternoon on. It's a community organizing platform. And the Waterloo Regional Labor Council, who were so supportive of us getting out this kind of information that they gave us money even though none of their members are actually able to come to the council, to come to the summit. So that's great for them. And we've also worked this morning with Wild Run Productions. They were the folks who put on the film. So as I said earlier, I'm the president of Campaign Gears, and So what I offer is strategy and implementation support to progressive groups. But where I come from at doing this work is having been an organizer in the labor movement for about 10 years. The most recent, before I was doing campaign years, I was the national organizing director for Workers United, which is a part of SCID. And so I really come from this angle in terms of like what's the most effective tools and strategies that we should be using to build power. My interest is in helping organizations be more effective. Less interested in, ooh, this is a hot new gizmo. This is, a fresh new tool or whatever. My interest is what's going to work so that your organizations become more effective. Oh, this is Charles's slide. He did his intro one slide early. That's okay. That's his nifty logo. I like that logo. I have to say. So our objectives today are to. So the last session we did, just to contrast and compare. The last session we did was how to validate your organization, how to show your organization exists and it has legitimacy. So the assumption today with this workshop is that your organization has already done that. Your organization is already online. It's got the basics. When someone says, oh, you're from blah, 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 and they go and look you up online, they find something. So this workshop, the intention is to go beyond that, from the reactive kind of situation to one where you're using your digital tools to go out and find people who could become supporters of your organization and get them involved. So that's what our goal is. So we're going to talk, and then of course we're going to try, maybe with more discipline than the last session, to have a free-for-all question and answer session at the end. So raise your hand. Yes, raise your hand. So just put forward. So I think a number of people have just walked in. So who has attended the last session? Has that changed since the last time I asked that question? Okay, a few more. Yeah, I thought I recognized more faces. Okay.
Cheers from the room.
Yeah, feel free to.
You just look around.
Just go. I've done it before. Just go to the office there and ask them that you need some chairs. They'll open that classroom over door.
Okay.
Awesome. Great. So, can you tell me who here has more than 1,000 Twitter followers? Awesome. Okay. All right. How about who has more than 500 Facebook friends? That's a little bit more. Okay, just giving us a sense. Who moderates or handles more than 3 or 4 Facebook pages? All right. 2? Let's see. It's 2. All right. Okay. All right. So, like, how many people are the person who's in charge of the social media stuff for your group? So, for the folks who did put up their hands, maybe just a couple of you could tell us what your hopes are for what role you might take on. Anybody want to just suggest? Yes?
Well, I had my own publishing company in '89, from '89 to '95, and I learned a lot then. I've created web pages since then. I've gone digital with the medium, and I just want to expand my knowledge so that I can use it for our union.
For a union local, you're already involved in.
Yes.
Right. And how is that union local handling this stuff right now?
We are brand new. We began in April this year.
Cool.
And so there is the parent NEU up in Lunenburg, Iqaluit. And so we're one of the locals over across Hudson Bay.
Okay.
And so I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to learn what I can do to help promote the union.
Right. Well, you may want to check out the slides from the session earlier this morning
Thank you.
for new and small organizations.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to share? Maybe just one other person? Yeah.
I think before you move on, will you be putting the link up or providing it?
Yes, if you sign in with your text message, the instructions, I'll put them back on the screen at the end of the session. If you missed them
Thank
from
you.
the beginning. Yes?
I'm with the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, but my director in Ontario, and after all, we co-manage SEOntario.org, which is a social enterprise engagement site. So it's my job to I'm in charge of that. There are other people who do the work and know a lot more about all this stuff.
Okay.
So I feel like
All right. That's a good
my
perspective.
knowledge.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. I mean, I'm sure we could all tell all of our stories, but given the time, I'm going to have to move along unless someone feels particularly compelled to share. So this slide, next slide here, you'll notice is, for those of you who were here this morning, it's the same slide because it's really important to understand why digital is different. And someone pointed out, different from what? So different from traditional means of organizing. Because it is the feedback, the two-way relationship between the user and the person producing content is two-way, much more than it's ever been in the past. So that could sometimes feel like it's a little stressful. Puts more pressure on you to produce good quality content because your audience is not just passive; they can turn you off if you're not good enough. But it also means that you get much more feedback. It means that you get responses from people that will help you perfect your content. In the old style campaigns, like when I first started doing election campaigns 20 years ago, you would adopt a plan for the campaign, do it, and if it changed things in the ballot box, then you knew that you did something right. But you have just devoted a whole bunch of months to this particular plan, and the only time you get to try it again is another 4 years. So in this style of operating, you can conduct experiments and use the data to see if what you're doing is actually working. You should follow the data and not just some expert's opinion. So like last session, a lot of people were asking, well, what about this? Should I do that? And the answer was, over and over, follow your list. Do something, try it out, see how people respond. And the data will tell you that. But you can only do that if you're collecting the data and using these systems to do that. So let's see here. So the first concept I'm going to give you is a ladder of engagement. How many people have heard this term before? You. Okay. All right. Do you want to share with us what your understanding of a ladder of engagement is?
Sure. So I got to like social media, social media, getting likes, getting followers, getting views, getting favorites, turning into like more active, like commenting, sharing, and then it increasing to like actually getting into messaging Facebook admin. So like slowly go from passive liking to more actively engaging.
Yeah. So a ladder of engagement has been quite heavily used to discuss social media. But really, it's bigger than that, and it's a concept that organizations could be well served to invest more time in outside of the social media. The trouble is, quite often people put these kind of responsibilities into silos in organizations, and so it's just the social media people who figure out this kind of stuff. But this interactive concept of trying to engage supporters and move them into higher levels of engagement with your organization applies outside of social media. It applies to everything you're doing. So the idea is that you think about how you get from someone who doesn't know anything about your organization at all to sort of passive engagement, reading your stuff, liking your stuff, to getting involved, maybe coming out to an event, to becoming part of the decision-making process and the leadership and ownership of your organization. And you map out the various activities that people can do at each of those levels, and a plan for how you're going to move someone from the bottom level up the various stages. The reason this comes in when social media is involved is because before, how many people have heard of the term collectivism or slacktivism, or terminology like that, like, oh well, it's not real organizing. Don't worry about digital. So this ladder of engagement is addressing that concept, which is that there is definitely more value to someone going to someone's door and actually talking to someone in person, especially if they're like a neighbor, building a relationship. But you've got to start somewhere. And if you make the barrier to entry so high that no one can ever get in, your organization won't grow. So thinking about what the lower levels of your ladder of engagement are, making them easy, like, oh, they just need to like the Facebook page. That's a very easy entry into your organization. But you don't want to have them just sit there. You want to keep moving them up. You want to have them be more involved over time so that your organization grows and becomes more powerful. So here's an example ladder of engagement that I just put together. So they see a friend post and they hit the like button. They go and then you reach out to them and you send them an email or you send them an invitation to come to your website and sign up for the email list. Then maybe after you hit them with a couple of different emails, they finally come to an event. And over time, they come to a few different events and they start saying, hey, these events are really cool. I'm going to bring my friends next time. And then the next time, they say, I think that I could have helped put the stage together. I could have invited some speakers. Yes?
I have a quick question. Will the slides be up later so we don't have to copy them?
Yes, all the slides will be up later, as will the video. So probably don't need to, unless you learn from writing, you probably don't need to write it. I know some people I totally don't. But anyway, then you eventually want to get to the point where people are so interested and engaged with the organization that they want to help build things like the entire strategy of having events over time, or even the campaign structure, right? If someone is really involved and they're really going to lend their energy and work to the organization, that's where you want to go. You want to get someone from here up to there. Social media is great because it's a very easy place for people to start. It's where people are at. The vast majority of conversations that people are having are on social media. It's not very often that people are wandering around their neighborhoods and talking to each other just randomly. So it's a good place to find people where they are and start to move them up. There's no ladder of engagement that's ever been written that exactly reflects what your organization is going to do. It's a theoretical model for people to discuss what you're all agreeing to. But you shouldn't get yourself stuck to it. Use it for the discussion and then move on.
So along those lines, one of the things I was told by MoveOn is they'll notice that sometimes low-level requests perform really poorly. So then they'll send a really high-level request. Like instead of sign this petition, they'll say, well, you host an event in your neighborhood. And then tons of people will agree to host the event in the neighborhood. Why is that happening? Precisely because this isn't actually like 100% of reality. If it's really important and you ask me for a lot, I'll respond because it looks like it's really important in a way that I might not if you send me another goddamn petition, which we all know don't work as well as we wish they did. So just to keep that in mind, that you can violate that to great effect now and then.
Yeah, I mean, all of these theoretical models are for you to get started and think and wrap your head around it. But once you get good enough, it's time to start trying something new and let the data lead you to better practices. Okay. Are there any questions about this concept? It's pretty central to what we're talking about today. All right. So I talked about this morning. Message discipline, especially when you get into organizations that are a little bit bigger. Message discipline is more important if you have multiple people handling the Facebook page or multiple people handling the website or whatnot. It can get more confusing. You really want to have an agreement as to what the messages are that the organization is putting out. And so the clarification that happened this morning was actually quite a good one. When I say message, I'm not saying everybody's writing the same words in the sentence. I'm saying that your message, the primary points of what you're trying to convey to your supporters, the probably 2 or 3 points maximum that your organization's key purposes are, that you want to be constantly saying to your supporters and to your potential supporters over and over and over again. You're not saying the same words every time, but it's the same message. Sometimes in election campaigns, people use something called a message box, which might help people understand what a message is. So a message box, well, it'd be good to draw it out here. So message box. So a message box is basically the concept that you figure out as a group an agreement of what's the story you're going to tell about ourselves, what we're going to say about our side, what are we going to say about the opposition, and that could be, you know, the other parties that are running the election, that could be the corporation you're campaigning against, that could be whatever. I mean, most campaigns get those two parts of your message. Then you also need to examine what is your opposition going to say about themselves and what they're going to say about you. And so you want to use that message box as an agreement between yourselves to have people understand what the messages are, that when you're talking about yourself or when you're talking about them, these are the things we're going to say. We may use different words, different videos, different whatever, but we're all going to agree that those things are the same. Because you've got to repeat them so many times. You have to repeat them over and over again. In advertising, they say that you have to see the same ad 6 times for it to really penetrate. So in a social media context where you're asking for something that's a little more complicated than buying a tasty cereal, you really need to repeat the same messages over and over and over again before they're really going to penetrate. So, yeah.
So just to add 2 small things. One is I'm going to pretend that I'm addressing a room full of talented professional communicators who are brilliant at what you do. So here's the thing. If you just went off and started talking about a particular kind of communications proficiency that is not the same as the ones we're mostly teaching today around digital skills. It's slightly different. And there's other skills that we're not going to talk about today, like learning how to code a website or doing analytics on demographics for micro-targeting. And the point I want to make is that all of us come with a bias that is usually the result of where we come from initially. Organizers have the bias that ladder of engagement. People who work with press initially have a bias around message control. People who are coders have a bias around how your website looks and whether it's been tested properly. And folks that did maybe marketing or advertising might have a bias around that. I think my main message here is understand that everyone has that bias and don't confuse it with the truth or the way things ought to be. It's super helpful in a team effort if you're like, oh, I'm really good at this stuff and I'm really open to hearing people over on these other corners of the communication spectrum and cultivating respect from the other folks for what you bring to the table as well, but not to be like anyone's a master communicator and everything, so there's one person who needs to be listened to for everything. I can't stress that enough because in small or medium organizations, there often aren't that many people doing the work. And if there's one person with a lot of status power and they're not an expert in all these different fields, you have a situation where the status power is conflated with expertise, resulting in communication failures. So that was one thing. And I had something else, and I've all forgotten it. So back to you.
So yeah, I mean, I think what Charles has said is important, and I also think that being that we have all these responsive technologies, don't let the experts tell you what you should be doing in your organization. Take these kind of suggestions that we're giving you and try them out and see what happens. See how your list responds. Your list will be different. Some lists will skew one way or another, and you really need to let your list tell you what you should be doing. we're really just going to try to give you some options for things to try and see what works. All right, so a particular struggle that a lot of organizations of this size that we're talking about here is that you don't necessarily have full-time staff doing this kind of stuff, but you should have as many people in the organization involved as you can get. In the past, a lot of times communications was siloed off away from the people actually doing the work, but you should be trying to mix those up so that the stories being told are being told by people who know what's going on. That being said, you need to use some sort of coordination to try to have everybody work together. It used to be that the broadcaster was just like some individual hierarchical person at the top of the food chain, and they were the only one that ever spoke on anything. But in these kinds of technologies, that's not true anymore. You need to have, you're going to have multiple people speaking, so they all need to be coordinating. One way to do that is a content calendar, which is to create a document that you share amongst yourselves that says, okay, on Monday we're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. And on Tuesday, you're going to be responsible for talking about this other thing. And it helps you keep track of what everyone's doing, but it also helps you make sure that you're producing content on a regular basis in a coordinated manner. Yep.
Every single organization I've ever worked with hated trying to learn how to use their content calendar. They found it incredibly difficult. It's like when that consultant comes and asks everyone to do a timesheet every day for 2 weeks. It's like the most mind-bogglingly irritating thing to ever have to do. So I'm going to say two things about that. One is, doing this carefully and comprehensively might not be something you can do because there's too few people working and you're more seat of the pants, and it's just like, don't try. But at least have something. At least have a weekly call where you say what you think is coming up. Don't ignore the concept of the content calendar just because the way you've tried to implement it was more than what you guys can handle. The second thing is much like other things, if you have someone who helps you start using a really good content calendar, imagine the ones that are painful and irritating, but if you stick at it for a month or two, you may then find out that it's solving so many problems that you used to have, so many weird conflicts or things that didn't happen, and you're like, oh wow, that helped. People's experiences will change the ability of the organization to work with it well. But don't just be like, one person in the office thinks you should do that, and their job is to harass everyone else to make it happen. Like, that's totally not going to work. Good point.
Yes?
If the organization already has a communication plan, how does this fit in with that?
Hopefully, it will fit in. But be aware that people in charge of your current plan might not play well with the other parts that might want to do it. So just take into account that it'd be great if it worked together. It might not. There might be some weird handshaking going on. The difference between a normal communications calendar is it's often based on things like when we issue a press release or when a publication goes to press, right? But this thing is like 3 or 5 times a day. It's making sure you tweet out this thing, making sure you post on Facebook. And the pace is much more rapid, but it will be informed by those larger communication hooks that already exist on the plan. But like, normally someone in charge of message control does not want you to send an email today that says, oh my God, big news tomorrow, stay tuned. They would think that's terrible. I would think that's great. So there's just a certain amount of tension.
Talking about calendar, I was told by someone that you can actually put items on and at the same time select whether you share them with other people or you kind of keep it completely private. You know, like send flowers to my wife. Right. You don't want to send that to everybody, but the rest of them.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's all sorts of that's a Google Calendar. You can certainly do that. So those are the primary theoretical concepts we're going to talk about today. If there's any questions, now's a good time. Next parts are going to be a little more a little less theoretical. But any questions? No. Okay. So let's talk about websites. Last session we didn't really talk about this at all. We just sort of skimmed over it. You need to have a website. But here, let's talk about what the different options are for getting a website. Last session we talked about the importance for having a domain name. That's priority number one, is to get control of your domain name. And you do that by registering it. Somebody needs to own it, and someone is responsible to the organization. But once you get your domain name, you need to have that domain name pointed at a website somewhere. And these are the various different options for website platforms. How many folks run a WordPress site right now? All right. Any other platforms? Drupal or Joomla? Yeah. Okay. Weebly. Okay. So the big players in the website field are the three ones at the top: website, WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal. Frankly, these days, my advice is that if you want to run your own site and you don't have the tools, you don't need the tools that NationBuilder offers, which I'll talk about in a second, your best choice is a WordPress site. It used to be that WordPress was kind of the wimpy part of the three ones, and Drupal was like the master for big, giant sites that had a whole lot of content, a whole lot of people working on them and stuff. Joomla was kind of for the more artsy designer types, but WordPress has become so ubiquitous and so universal that the big key factor, right, is you'll be able to find people who can help you with a WordPress site and work for fairly cheap, pretty much anywhere. Drupal developers are pretty expensive by comparison. So Drupal sites are a lot more complicated, but most organizations are actually not big enough to really warrant it. So you got to think about the size of your organization for that. That being said, Weebly and Squarespace are decent for websites for simple organizations that aren't very complicated, don't want a huge amount of a website. Get something up online pretty quick, and they take care of most of the details for you. NationBuilder is a platform that I work on, and the reason for that is because it has a website portion, but it also handles email, text messaging, financial stuff, and membership database all together in one platform. We'll talk a lot more about that in the NationBuilder session. But if you happen to be doing all those things, it's a platform that's built for community organizing. So if you happen to be doing all those different pieces of community organizing, it's really simple to just go boom, and then your organization's online and you have everything. Are there any questions about website platforms? We could, just before I open that, go, can't get stuck on this, because you could argue for days about this, but we'll touch on it a little bit. Yes?
Cost, NationBuilder, is it expensive? I know Drupal could be.
Well, actually, WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal are all free.
Okay, there's some.
But they are free software, which has to run on a server somewhere. So you have to pay for the server, and then you have to have somebody who knows how to do it, which could be a wide margin. Some WordPress development, you could probably get a high school student to help you do a WordPress site. Some Drupal developers won't do sites for less than $100,000. So the margin is really wide. Yes?
Just a quick thing. So many web developers started off in high school learning one platform or one set of things, and they got really excited at all the things they could do with it. And for the rest of their lives, they're going to have a soft spot for one particular thing. Beware. You really want to choose between these platforms with someone who has no emotional affinity to any of them. Because the truth is that if you said your budget is $1,000, I know people who could, for that price, spend well their time on any of these platforms. But the question is going to be, well, what exactly did you want to do? And why is that platform especially useful? And it's fine if the answer is, well, because we trust him on other stuff and he likes Drupal, so we use Drupal. But like, don't be like, oh, someone said we should really pick WordPress. That's not a good reason. It has to be like, you know, because we're doing something that will require different plugins that we're going to experiment with, and that is easier to accomplish with WordPress than Drupal. Or Drupal people charge $150 an hour if they're really good. WordPress people charge $80 an hour even if they're good. Like, it's going to be about the specifics, not about the brands that people love.
That being said, you should all be using NationBuilder. And hiring me to do it for you. So are there other questions about the platform? Yes?
How do you source someone to build your website? For instance, I was trying to get a website up in spring, and I called like someone from Yellow Pages that never responded to me. Like I called Algonquin College and like to try to get a student, but I didn't hear back from them. So like, how do you get someone? Where do you go through?
That's a good question. So it's there's a lot of demand for people with website skills. It's something that it's kind of strange. There's a lot of demand, and yet people think that they shouldn't have to pay for it, right? And so, I mean, I'm a member of the Canadian Freelancers Union, and it's a constant problem that we have is that people think that we should just build websites for them for free because it will give us exposure. You gotta find a way in your budget. If you don't have the skills to do it yourself, you gotta either find a budget in your program to get someone and pay them good wages. You pay people good wages, you will find people. Or downgrade your expectations to something that's simpler that you don't need to pay as much for. But if you have enough money to actually hire someone to put out a bid or to post on your website that you're looking to hire someone, and you pay good money, they'll come to you. So yes?
What about a small community association that has a website? You've been through 3 webmasters, but eventually they don't want to do everything to be paid. What would be a reasonable price to pay a consultant to set up just a small community association website that's kind of obviously a lot of work? Because we don't know, and we feel we don't really want to do it free. But I just off the top, what would you say? What last?
I have charged clients between $3,000 and $18,000 to get a website online, depending on what kind of project they're running. Sorry?
What about your small community?
Well, at a certain point, and from a freelancer's point of view, there's a certain size of project that just doesn't make sense because the overhead of doing business is too high to do something smaller than X amount of dollars. That's probably a handful of $1,000. There are some folks who do specialize in those. They've organized their business around the smaller part of the market. But
you would say from 3 to 18.
Well, that's my client base, but other freelancers will be different.
Do you have like an association?
I'm a member of the Canadian Freelancers Union, which is a good place to start. We're all union members who do communications and digital work, part of Uniform.
That's a great question because a lot of groups are going to have that problem. And I'll just say the way you asked it.
You've been having it for about 3 years.
Yes, indeed. The way you asked it, I'm just going to challenge you to ask it in a different way. Instead of saying, because we're small, no, I'm just saying, you should be thinking about it. What is this website actually doing for us as an organization? And what is the value proposition of having it done well or not at all or poorly? And I don't mean that in order to say, and therefore it might need to cost lots of money. No, I'm saying potentially it's just a vanity project. You don't really need an important website. But I'm saying your cost is going to be specifically about the value add. And if the value add requires, for example, that you have a weekly program that changes, like your radio station. I'm not saying you do. I'm saying you have to think of that list of things and why they're important to you. And then the developer will say, well, doing that is going to cost you this much. And doing that will cost you that much. And doing the design is that much. And that's how the price is going to sort of come up in the end. And you should be thinking about it, maybe not in terms of this much money for our website and we're done, but maybe about how from where we are now to where we want to be in 2 years, we're going to spend this much money per year, and each of those things that we think are valuable are going to be added online as time goes on. And what's good about that is that instead of having to wait for it all to be done to get value, then there's a piece of it that was valuable that is now done, and you're happy with it, and that's great, and it moves forward from there.
Can I ask a specific question before we launch back in? Do you use Dreamweaver with Nation Builder, or does Nation Builder take care of everything?
So you don't use Dreamweaver with any of those platforms. Dreamweaver, people don't really use. You can build websites from scratch. Still, these days, it is possible to do.
But you
But
can
these kinds of platforms, these content management systems, have become so universal that not very many people do it that way anymore.
Okay, thank you.
It's just these platforms take so much of the like kind of basic parts of just what people expect from websites now that to go back to hand coding would just be, unless the site is really, really simple, like it just needs to be banged out really fast, maybe, but these sites are a good place to start.
Thank you.
For the average person, these sites are gonna get you going much faster.
Like a lot of these instead of coding, like they'll have the plugins, I guess, right? Like all the
Yeah, they'll have, well, I mean, even just the act of getting to, I mean, WordPress, to get to the point where just a basic WordPress install would take, I mean, I did that. I built something like WordPress in a computer science class a few years ago, and we did that for 4 months. And all we did was build the platform to get to something that wasn't anywhere near what WordPress is like. So you don't want to do that to get to the point where your site is online. It's already been done, so just let that be taken care of. All right, so are there any other questions about platforms? I mean, it's a good debate to have. You do need to choose it for your organization. Yeah?
Are there any technical questions regarding was it Drupal or is it open source? Or like,
Well, all three of the ones on the top are open source. The three on the bottom are hosted. So the difference being, just so people are familiar, so open source meaning that there's a community of people out there that are writing the software. They're not getting paid for it necessarily. They're probably doing it for free. They're just contributing to the larger project. But it does mean that it's a little more complicated because there's no central company that's necessarily responsible for it. And you can't necessarily get support from a central place. You have to hire a third party who knows how to use these tools. The ones on the bottom, well, first of all, the ones in the middle are actually like, they're free, I think, for the most part, but they're usually like, if you want this extra feature, you have to pay this couple of dollars. They're very, very basic. You just sign up and you have like a landing page kind of deal. Nation Builder is a proprietary software. It's run by a company in California. We actually have the head of business development from Nation Builder coming to our next session. And it is, and so the only people who can change the code in Nation Builder are the guys who are working in the server farm in California. So there are different advantages of that. Right now, I mean, the only relationship that Campaign Gears has with Nation Builder is that it's the best product for doing that particular task, in my opinion, at this moment. If that changes, we'll use something else. But Nation Builder is particular. It's got a niche that's particular to this crowd of people, and that's why we're talking about it so much. If you were in a completely different niche of people, it wouldn't make the same sense. Yeah?
I get quantities of spam on WordPress, and I wonder if there's some trick that I can know.
There's no universal rule to how to fix spam, and I don't think you could say that any of these platforms are better than others at addressing that problem. Some amateur mistakes that people do make is just putting their email address, just plunking it down on their website. Don't do that. If you have the skills, try to make a contact us form. That will take care of most of your spam problems. Though if your address has been sitting out on your website for the last years, you're done. That's just the way it is. The other avenue would be to make sure that your email is with a decent email provider. If your email is going through just the email client that comes with your hosting, they probably don't have very good filters. If you have your email going to a Gmail, to a Google Apps account, you will probably never see junk mail. I never see junk mail in my system.
Well, it's set up so that I have to approve things, and that's where, please approve, that's what it's there.
Oh, you're meaning like blog comments and stuff like that?
Yeah.
There are various, I really can't go into that into huge detail, especially in WordPress, since I'm not an expert in it anymore. Some of these platforms are better at handling that kind of stuff than others. I think it does illustrate the difference between the hosted and self-hosted platforms. The hosted platforms like Nation Builder, they take care of that stuff for you. The non-hosted ones, you sort of have to deal with it more yourself. So it's all about managing those sorts of things. Other questions?
Just one quick thing. Some people have a really strong political preference for open source platforms. You should beware of these people because they don't want you to test what you're doing based on a feature comparison or price or suitability for what you're trying to do because they have some other kind of bias. That said, it's the same kind of bias that causes us to buy fair trade or to, ask if our clothes were made by children. But for your purposes as medium, non-super large organizations, like there are so many horror stories of people who, for political reasons, went down one of these paths and ended up in a place where they really, really regretted it. They couldn't say so.
That was a great way. I was trying to walk around that issue without mentioning it. Good way of handling it. Yes.
Okay, I started getting into this sort of stuff in my 60s, and already I found that the things that I thought would be useful and that would last for a while, in terms of social media, soon became irrelevant and died out. So when I've been able to find a platform where I could, let's say, use my Yahoo email address and then channel it through that other company, then if Yahoo ever went extinct, then I could just get another way of getting mail into that. And so those are the things that I look for in let's say, Nation Builder or something like that I can find another way of getting my email or basically my website without losing content.
Well, so notice two things that we've said today already. So one was own your own domain name, and the other was when you're picking which of these platforms, think about how hard it is to find people who can do the work, right? And those two things, if you have your own domain name and you have a platform that's fairly well known and there's a lot of developers around it, if anything happens, you can just bail from the current situation and go somewhere else. But you do need to have control of those two things to be able to deal with that. Change is a constant. In this kind of setting, there'll be change. That's why I said I don't have a particular relationship with Nation Builder. Nation Builder didn't exist 2 years ago. 2 years from now, I don't know if it will be the top of the heap. Something else might come along.
So it's like being old. You need to adapt.
You have to adapt. You have to adapt to these things. But I also think that we have to remember that the thing that needs to be leading us is the people, and not the technology. So the most important part is the people who are involved in your group, the people you're talking to. Where are they at? What kind of tools are they using? If they're on Facebook, you need to be meeting them on Facebook. So don't let one particular tool's feature set dictate. You need to think about what the capacities of your team are and your audience, and pick your tools accordingly. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to skip. So I'm going to skip through these. If you get the slides, there are notes attached to the slides, and there's no more explanation. I am going to tell you about one trick that's come out, which is called Facebook Website Custom Audiences. And the reason I'm interested in telling you this, it's kind of a niche topic, but it demonstrates the crossover between all these different platforms we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Facebook and Twitter shortly. So Facebook has come up with remember, Facebook is trying to get you to pay to advertise to people. That's how their business model works. So they figured out that a way to help you with that and help the connection between your website and Facebook is that you can install a code on your Facebook that if someone visits your website while they're logged into Facebook, there's a code that pings back to Facebook and lets them know that there's that connection there. They don't have to hit like. They don't have to sign up for something. It just is that they had Facebook open on their computer and they didn't log out, and then they went and visited your website. And then on Facebook, you can now get a list of who those people are, and you can advertise to them. Right? So everybody goes, ooh, but remember, this is powerful stuff. We should be using it ourselves. Yes, it's a little icky when corporations are using it to sell stuff to us, but you know, we got to level the playing field, right? So it's a great thing that if you have it on your website, it means that someone comes, checks out your website. Maybe your content isn't quite compelling enough to get them to sign your petition or whatnot, and so they lose their interest and they go back to Facebook and boom, there's their ad, and you can get them back again. You get another kick at the can. So it's important to try. Yes.
So I could be wrong because I'm not that good at this stuff, but I think you're talking about two things. One is the custom audiences, the other is retargeting. And the distinction is that a custom audience might be my list of 1,000 email addresses, and I upload it to Facebook. And now I can advertise content directly to these 1,000 people whenever I feel like it. I would just say advertise to these people, and they will start getting ads. But retargeting isn't about people you uploaded. Retargeting is about you randomly visited my website. I now grab you with a cookie. And with that cookie, I can make sure that an ad that I've created on Facebook retargets you, especially because you now have that cookie on your computer. And it's a great sales technique. If I find out someone is shopping for something, I can then hit them on Facebook with ads for the very thing they were thinking of buying. And the evidence is in. That's a really good way to get someone to buy your thing. I don't know if it works in politics the same way, but why wouldn't it, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is this the regular code you're talking about, where you just have a link from your website to Facebook, or is this?
No, it's a special bit of code that you have to get from. No, it's part of the. You have to pay to advertise the list that gets generated, but to get the code, you just do it. You can actually just search for Facebook website custom audiences, and you'll get guides on how to do it. But it's really just sort of the point of demonstrating this. It's not a key thing to do. It's a good thing to do, but it's showing how these different platforms are interacting with each other. You want to have your home base, but you also want to meet people where they're at, which is on social media. So you use these kind of tools to bridge that gap between the two.
So, when you say uploading the list of people to Facebook, is that just strictly from this, or is this?
No, Charles was heading off to a whole different ballgame.
You have like I have a list of people. Can I upload those people?
Yes, you can do that, but that's a different topic than this. That's custom audiences. Okay, yes?
I just had a question about sort of security of that information, because people are websites because you have to share your information, what have you. So, I mean, once you put it into the Facebook realm, knowing that this person was visiting your website on Facebook, then that, is there a risk that then they take that information and run with it?
Well, there's the reason we focus on starting on getting your home base is because when you're working with Facebook, you're working with a corporate master who can do whatever they want, and those permission forms that people sign have all sorts of gobbledygook and they change all the time. So yes, you do need to be concerned to not trust Facebook and Twitter. But the idea here is to meet people where they're at. People are on Facebook. And so you're using these tools. They have already consented to the terms of Facebook. And so if there are, I know that, I mean, there are groups of people who, like, say fuck Facebook. And that's fine, that's great. That's their choice. These tools won't work on them because they don't have a Facebook account. So that's great. It keeps them out of the pool. But if you have gone on Facebook, you've probably, hopefully, have thought about what that means and have made a choice. A lot of people they haven't made a choice, but the thing to keep in mind about all these tools, and in my mind, is that we're up against forces that are very big, that are very strong, and have a lot of money, and they're using all these forces. Those oil sand advertisements that are all over the place. They're using these tools, and they're using every tool in the book to try to win. And so we gotta think about the balance between purity of operation and winning. So that's, I mean, I come from an organizer perspective, but yes.
I just want to say, all of your concerns about privacy are too late. What I mean is this. In the old days, the good old days, we were like, oh no, what if the government has the membership list of my organization that wants to make revolution? Well, first of all, they have it. And secondly, they don't care that much at this point. Here's what they actually care about. They want to know that if you subscribe to a particular magazine, that you're more likely to buy a Subaru Forester. They care about whether if you are a single mother living in a particular suburb with an income distribution of X, does that make you more or less likely to vote for the Liberal or NDP parties? They care about that. There's nothing you can do to stop them from knowing that. Your particular information that you're uploading to Facebook doesn't add or remove anything from that. The privacy violation is already taking place because you use a credit card and you have a bank account and you file your taxes and you show, like, it's all that stuff. It's not what you necessarily do. And that's not a cry to give up your email addresses, but it's just to put it in perspective that, like, all the terrible things that are happening are already happening and you can't stop them, and you probably can't even make it worse than it is.
I guess my take on that would be that we shouldn't put up obstacles in front of our ability to organize resistance without absolutely having to for some reason. But anyway, we don't want to kill this topic too much, but there were a few hands over there.
Okay, so you're talking about internet jujitsu. We're using the power of good that against them.
Trying to, yeah. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah. Okay, so let's see here. Let's see that one. Let's head right into. So I'm just going to talk about text messaging because we've done it in this room. We should get to my slide about Facebook, which I put in here. So text messaging is a good alternative. In the last session, I was talking to someone who was organizing recent refugees to Canada who are not, they don't have access to digital tools because they don't have the money for it. Text messaging is a good alternative to keep in mind when you're working with those kind of situations because it works on any cell phone, even an old clunky flip phone that's like they're almost being given away by the cell phone companies. And it doesn't require a data package. So it's like the barest, if you're going to do digital stuff, it's the barest threshold that you need. If you can't do that, if your people involved in your organization can't do that because they don't have access to those kind of tools, then you probably shouldn't be doing digital organizing. You should be focusing on other ways of doing things, of which there are plenty, and they're very valuable. Yes?
Do you do this through Nation Builder?
I use Nation Builder to do this, yes, but there are lots of ways, lots of competing companies that do this. They're particularly good for urgent messages since they show up on your phone right away. You can't overdo it. People have less tolerance of text messages than they do of email messages, for example. But in this day and age where it's almost impossible to find people at home on their phones, using text messages are a good way to get people's cell phone numbers. You can call them. During most election campaigns, if folks have volunteered, you spend like half of your time dialing numbers where there's nobody home. You just keep doing that over and over and over again. So this kind of tactic helps you actually reach people. So let's see here. Where is my? Here's my Facebook. Right, so what time is the session in? Is it 2:45, right? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about Facebook because in the order of importance, I talked about this in the earlier session, but just to review, your first priority is your website domain name. Your next priority is your email list because you own that stuff, and you can, if you've got that, you've got everything you need to have an organization. Your next priority is Facebook because that's where 1 billion humans are, 75% of whom visit it every single day. So that's, you want to make that connection between those two places. That Facebook's a good place to start your outreach. Now, the trouble with Facebook is it's a for-profit company, and they want to make money. And so to play with Facebook, they are sort of funneling everybody into a situation where they're going to, organizations like ours that are trying to outreach on Facebook are going to have to pay to do it. For instance, this is a graphic that was created by the Washington Post where someone did a 24-hour study where they just sat on their Facebook and liked every single post that they saw over and over and over again for 24 hours. And then they went around and they looked at all the different groups that they, the likes that they had, companies and organizations and stuff, and saw all the content that had been posted on those pages in that 24 hours. And this is what they found, which is that Tim, who was the person who was doing the study, saw all of these posts, 1,400 posts. There's some subtle stuff going on with new posts and old posts, but I'm going to just focus on this. 1,400 posts. But there were also at the same time on all the other pages, there were 1,800 other posts that were posted that they never saw, even though they were like focusing on their Facebook and looking at every single post that came by, because Facebook never showed them this. Facebook determined, using their algorithms, that Tim was only interested in those 1,400 and didn't care about these 1,800. And so all the people who had posted all these things on here said, oh, well, we're gonna put this post on our Facebook page and everybody's gonna see it. No, they didn't. Notice that the portions of pages that were not seen are way more pages than posts by people. Let's see the legend up there, posts from friends versus posts from pages. These are all posts from pages. Right? So relying on your Facebook page to get content to people is risky because a lot of people aren't seeing what you're posting. Yeah.
I noticed sometimes when posting, I started seeing more things from certain people, and then after a little while, I'd stop seeing those again. So I'm just wondering if you know anything about sort of the timeline of like how long, how fast are they sending, like kind of thing. Like is it like after 3 days they're gonna scale back certain things?
Well, nobody knows what the formula is. Facebook keeps the formula very private, and anytime anybody finds something, they get it. So that's not true anymore. They don't want people gaming the system because the product that Facebook is selling is an audience of users who are getting stuff that they like. And so if you figure out how to game it so that you can get your posts up higher despite the fact that people don't really like your stuff, then they're breaking their business model, right? So just for a second. So the challenge is to figure out how to get content on the Facebook that people like. That's the challenge. Facebook has said, we will promote content that your users engage with. They measure engagement by watching the video, commenting, liking, sharing, taking those actions. And the more you get your people to do that, the more it's going to get shared with the rest of the universe. So you've got to focus on content that people are going to want to like. Yes?
Yeah, this is the reason why I managed the page for the free and accessible transit campaign in Toronto. And I've noticed I would often get more likes and more comments when I posted as personal status updates.
Yep.
There was a recent study that I think was released by Wired or some geek website. They're trying to figure out the algorithm, parts of the algorithm that Facebook is using to promote certain posts at the top of the newsfeed. And one of my friends actually did it. He's a big geek, so he did it, and he said, everybody look at my Facebook post. Facebook is trying to figure out ways of actually trying to figure out what goes to the top of the newsfeed. And apparently, if you have a lot of excited language, they try to deconstruct the language. If it's something that seems like a major life event that you're really excited about, a lot of exclamation points and pictures, that tends to go higher.
Well, there has been proven a direct relationship between the word congratulations and how many people will see your post. They figure people say congratulations in response to people getting married, having a kid, getting a new job, and those are the things that everybody will see. I've actually gamed that a little bit myself. Every time the Olivia Chow campaign does anything, I'm like, congratulations on that really great idea. I have yet to see whether that actually has an impact, but it does, they're definitely looking for that kind of indicators that people following this person think this is a big deal, and so we're going to share it with more people. Yes?
Do you think it's maybe also partially cookie-based? Because I know when I use my computer for Facebook, I completely forget that humans exist on my Facebook sometimes, and then I would use my phone. There's all kinds of posts from them. And I'm like, what about you? But it's a completely different string of posts that I'm seeing on the phone.
It's pretty hard to say that it's X or Y. Facebook's algorithm is incredibly large and complex, and they're always changing it. And anytime anybody figures it out, they change it again to make sure that nobody understands it. It's not in their business interests for people to really understand yet, except for what they have publicly said, which is they will share more content that has more people engaging with it. So focusing less on gimmicks and tricks and stuff, and more on what's the content that the people involved in our issue care about and are interested in, and what's going to get them to share it with other people.
Yes, okay, that's great. So you mentioned the home base thing. Sounds like an important, like if Facebook for whatever reason wanted it down. We know for a fact they can bump people up with advertising. People wanted it down, play your hits or your because of various controversial issues. I guess the thing is still keeping people out to that home base, like, your website, whatever. Like,
right. Yes. So yeah, having it is well known. Like Facebook has shut down groups on political issues all the time. It happens all the time.
On what issues?
Well, a number of union locals have had their pages shut down. There are battles when people post political issues that are, one end of the other side goes and reports that page. Facebook doesn't necessarily do a huge amount of investigation before they start taking pages down. They just see that this page got a whole bunch of people reporting it, so we're just going to take it down, and then you're out of luck. So relying exclusively on Facebook is kind of dangerous. And that's why I'm suggesting that you have a website and you have an email list, so that if that happens to you, you still have something to rely on. The only thing you can really own is the domain name and your list of supporters. You don't get a list of supporters from Facebook. You just get access to people who they know. And if you can't get that list out, then you got to figure out how to get those people to come to your website to do something so that you get that information captured. Any other questions about that? Yes?
Is it similar with Google Plus?
I don't really know about Google Plus very much, frankly. I have prioritized Facebook because it is so massively used, and I've put Twitter in the next place down. Twitter is about half the size of Facebook, and about half of the accounts on Twitter are actually inactive. So I put it kind of lower on the list than my Facebook interests. And then I put everything else down there. All the other platforms, Twitter, other like LinkedIn or Google Plus or Tumblr or like all those platforms. Unless your organization is like really kicking you out of the park on Facebook and Twitter, don't even pay attention to the bottom stuff. It's just there's not enough people there, and it's just a lot of work. And you really need to bang out the first two first. You've got to prioritize. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there are any different demographics that you know of between Facebook and Twitter, because we're actually probably posting less on Twitter, but are getting a lot more people following us on Twitter over the last sort of month that we're doing it than on Facebook.
Well, how old do people think that the average Facebook user is?
60.
What was that? 24. 24? You got 60, 24? It's actually 49. It's 49.
So if you're not going to get the kids without Twitter.
Twitter is pretty important if your organization is skewing young. If you're a particular, now, I mean, in Canada, you have to remember, like, who are the people who vote? They're not young people, they're 49-year-olds. So it might actually be exactly where you're looking, right? So yeah, there is some demographic data out there about the different platforms. It's hard to get it broken down by what country. Like the average age of people on Facebook is 49, but that's 1 billion people all around the planet. So how many of those are Canadians? It's hard to know. But there are studies out there that break it down into different groups, and you can study that. All right. So let's talk about Facebook advertising. Let's talk about that. So I don't actually have a slide on it, but it is becoming particularly important, being this dynamic. The way to get around this dynamic is to pay. The trick is to figure out how to not waste your money. So Charles, we're just talking about Facebook advertising.
Can I tell the story?
Yes, you're more the expert on this one.
Yeah, so I'll try and make this quick and entertaining. So a few months ago, I was buying ads for a page I run for Ready for Warren. Warren is a presidential candidate who refuses to admit it in the United States. And at first, it was all my own money. There's no sponsor. So at first, I was being very stingy, and I would test $10 on an ad to get more likes, and it would take me 50 cents or 40 cents to buy one. Oh, that's no good. And then I'd get one, and it would convert at 20 cents. That's great, and I put $10 more in it. And I was watching how the things that I was doing would be reflected in the price per like, so I could be ready to sort of take advantage of when the price was low. I think the changing price has less to do with my brilliant advertising technique and more with, is she in the news that week? Did I get a sudden spurt of new Facebook likers who, because they're new, are more engaged than the ones who joined a year ago? And as a result, I'm getting more traction. Did we have an especially good piece of content recently that is causing that to change? So it's a humbling experience. The second half of the story is I'm now working for some other candidate who is running. I really wish I could buy likes for 10 cents or 20 cents, but my price is more like 50 cents or 80 cents. And I've been trying everything I can, changing ads and who it's being targeted to. And I've been doing, I'll spend money on boosting so more people see my stuff. And then a day later, I try and buy those same people as likers, thinking if they see me more than once, then that will make a difference and so on. I haven't been able to get the price to go down. In fact, I can't see that anything I'm doing with any audience or visual has any impact on the price of anything that I do. So I have 3 hypotheses. One is I'm terrible at this. Don't discount that. The second is that it just takes far more time and effort to get it right than I'm willing to commit for the amounts of money that we're spending on ads. Maybe if I had a week and I did nothing but, I could get 25 cents a like and I'd be brilliant. But that's not worth it. The other another possibility is that I'm a victim of changing Facebook algorithms that made it possible for me to get cheap likes a few months ago, and almost impossible to get those same cheap likes today. And there's nothing I can do about that. And I don't even know that that's the reason. I will never know the reason. And then the last thing is trying to work on a local election campaign, local being the state of New York, is going to be more challenging than talking about a national issue or national personality. Most of you are going to work on boring local stuff most of the time. Therefore, the cost of advertising stuff in this way is going to be more expensive than if you're talking about hot-button national issues. So that doesn't mean not to do it. It means understand that that's the reality and look for those moments where you can connect the thing that you're doing to a national issue that's getting news cycle attention, because that will actually reduce your cost of advertising at that moment. So think about your advertising budget, whatever it is, as something that you're sort of waiting, and then you pounce. Waiting, and then you pounce. And of course, you can't pounce with too much money because the impact will decrease. But that's a good way to think about how you use advertising. It's like one more thing you can throw at something to get what you want.
Just before we get to that question, how many people here have paid for Facebook stuff in the various different machinations? Okay, so not very many folks have tried it. Okay.
So can you explain a little bit more about what's the
what are we talking about? Yes.
What do you? what's the real benefit of getting those likes to
9 times out of 10, buying Facebook likes is a stupid idea. You shouldn't do it. Facebook likes is what we call a vanity metric. A vanity metric like how many page hits or how big is your list size or something like that. These are things that sound good to a board of directors or to a boss who doesn't understand how these things work because it shows you're doing well. In fact, if anyone in your organization cares a whole lot about this, just spend some of your own money artificially boosting likes to prove you're doing a good job. Don't tell them what I just said. Because if they're impressed by that, yeah, you. What we really care about is always going to be something that can't be captured with the word like or fan. So in my case, the reason why I wanted to have more likes on the Ready for Warn page is that I saw that there were other Ready for Warn pages. And I decided that my biggest competitor was a page with 11,000 likes. And I was in a hurry to pass 10,000 so that if anyone saw both of us, they would think that we're at least the same and not that I'm a little pipsqueak and that's the the better one or something like that. So knowing that it's not that important, I had a reason for why I had to get to that number as fast as I could. With the current campaign I'm on, it's a campaign that doesn't have much money. Our biggest challenge is name recognition. I just want people to know the name of this candidate.
Which is what?
Shh. We're in Canada now. So my excuse is I want people to see that name. Even if they don't like, even if they don't click, even if they don't get any engagement, I just want people to see that name, which will be remembered by them. So I'm picking audiences that I feel like will be sympathetic and will pay attention, and I'm getting them to see that name. And I almost don't care necessarily how many people do stuff with it because I get what I bought, even if nothing happens as a result. So in that sense, there's like an argument that that's the least expensive form of online advertising that I can get that is aimed at a tight demographic and which doesn't force me to go to a fancy ad buying firm that will charge $10,000 as a minimum buy in order to do the work. So you should ask yourself, what's your excuse? What's your excuse for doing this? And maybe one that does apply to you is you have 30,000 members in your organization. Your Facebook page has 2,500 likes. So if I'm an employer looking at your union, I'm realizing that this is an incredibly weak union. They either have no digital capacity, all their members are old and retired and don't use Facebook, they don't have a team that does communications properly. You're weak. So we have to fix that. We have to make sure that you have at least 10 or 15,000, which would suggest that at least half your members, almost all of whom do use email, are at least nominally connected to your Facebook page, even if they don't pay attention, even if they never read your content. They don't get to see your stats. So that would be a reason for why you spend money on like a customized list of those email addresses to get those likes up, because you have a rationale for it. It can't ever just be so we can have more likes.
All right. Other questions? We have 25 minutes before we have to get out of the room. Yes?
I have one question, but it's on Facebook.
Okay. Let's do a free-for-all. That's exactly what I was.
So earlier in the webpage part, you had one tip saying don't do a slider. No slider.
Oh, yes.
I'm curious because we just got a slider.
Okay, so on the slide that I flipped past because I thought we were running out of time, I had a line that said, "Don't use a slider on your website." A slider is one of those things that people tend to put at the top of their websites where they have like an image that flips past, right? So the studies show that the vast majority of people never click on anything but the first one. And so all you're doing is tricking yourself into thinking that the users are paying attention to anything past the first one. People online, if you really, it's interesting because it's the same thing as the dynamic during the film class this morning, where they're talking about like, take 10 seconds of a shot. It's because when you're sitting there, 10 seconds feels like a really long time, right? If you think about a video, a picture slider, even if you have it set for like 3 seconds per slide, you're still thinking, if you've got 3 of them, then someone's going to sit there staring at the top of your web page for 9 seconds. And nobody does that. people are flip, 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 flip. And so they'll see the first thing on there. If they like it, they click on it. If not, they'll scroll. So investing a lot of time and energy in those other slides is just wasting your time. And tricking yourself into thinking that that content is being exposed to your users, which it isn't. The better tactic would be to put image number 1 and whatever content's associated with it up for a week. And then put up image number 2 up for a week. And then image number 3 up for a week. That way you stay really fresh. No user has ever seen content that's older than 7 days. And you still hit those issues that you wanted to hit. Unfortunately, though, I think what's actually happening in a lot of cases for people who have sliders is that people are not making a decision about what they actually want to focus on. It's a easy way to handle that you're doing content by committee and no one wants to make a decision about what the actual focus is. And so they just say, okay, we'll just put everything up. You can't do that. You got to focus on something. You got to make those hard decisions or it will be ineffective. Yes?
Can you explain a little bit between the difference of what you were talking about before, which is someone's looking at your website, have Facebook open, you can do targeted advertising versus buying Facebook ads or promoting a post.
Right. So you can do Facebook advertising. Facebook advertising works by defining an audience. And Facebook gives you a whole bunch of different options about what that audience is. The most basic audience is people who like your page, and their friends. It's always the people who like your page and their friends. You can also do something that's called a lookalike audience, which is you give them the people who like your page, and they'll give you a list of people who look like the people who like your page. And if they do some magic with algorithms to find people who have similar interests, who like similar things, who look like that group of people. Charles was talking about the act of uploading your email list. So what that means is you're giving them your email list, and they'll go and find everybody on your list who has the same email address that you're providing on their Facebook profile. And they'll make that into a group of people, and you can then advertise to them. That doesn't work so well with union folks, as in my experience, because a lot of union folks use their personal email on their Facebook and then their union email when they're putting it onto email lists. So that won't work quite. I've had about a 50% success rate doing that kind of thing. Other groups, you'll have a higher list because there's more crossover. The final thing that I was talking about was putting some code on your website that messages back to Facebook that this person has shown up on your website and creates an audience to which you can advertise on all the people who've shown up on your website. So you can mix and match all those different audiences and advertise to them in all sorts of different ways. But the thing you got to do is create that audience by those various different actions that I just described. Does that make more sense?
So on Facebook, if you're a group, you can create either a group or a page. And of course, if you create a group, you have a little more control because you can set parameters depending on if you put them or not. But can you identify any other clear, distinct advantages and disadvantages to both? Or should we have both in our organization? Focus on one.
You have to think about what the point of your Facebook interaction is. Right? We have this, it's interesting, inside the, Rez is at the door there, he gave the film session this morning, but we're both members of the Canadian Freelancers Union, which has had this debate about Facebook page, Facebook group, something else, and people were arguing about it and around and so around and around. And it became apparent that people had to agree on what exactly the objective was before they were arguing about what platform to use. So what's the objective? For an organization like the Canadian Freelancers Union, the objective is not to have internal union conversations on Facebook because our employers are on Facebook. We don't want them hearing about us bitching about someone who stiffed us on a bill or something. we want to keep those conversations to ourselves. You know, we're building a bad client list. We don't want to have that conversation out in public. Facebook is not the place to do that. But on the other hand, we're also trying to grow the union. So if people are just sort of like bouncing around on Facebook and they're like, oh, well, I wonder if there's a union for freelancers, and they put it in the search bar, they need to be able to find us. And that's where that page that exists needs to be why you would join our union. It's the public face of the organization. So in our estimation, what we've done is focused on having an outward-looking Facebook page with the ideas of recruitment and internal processes for discussing the inner workings of the union. And they're not; those are not on Facebook. Other questions? Yes?
This might sound simple, but it's a question I need to ask. Setting up a Facebook for an organization, is it pretty much the same as for an individual? Is the process done?
So Facebook pages exist separate. Some organizations set up Facebook profiles and then just put their name in the name area. You should not do that. You should set up a Facebook page, which is
It's what they did the same process that it's
it's a object in the Facebook system that is managed by individuals, but it's not a person, and it has different functionality than a person. Yeah. Yes.
I just want to add, like, you've delivered a whole lot of information. I can see someone being like, oh, there's all these things to do, and what do I do, and it's just me. So I was just going to teach you like a kind of a heuristic, a mental rule for how you decide what you're going to do, like when you get into the office, is that who do I want to reach? And be as specific as possible. What do I want them to do that I can observe them doing? What do I really want them to do? Obviously, we as humans could care less if people like us on Facebook. Like, there's always going to be some actual thing you want them to do. So the question is, what is that, and how does my communication help get there? It has to be very clear in everyone's mind why that will lead to that. And then the third thing is, where are they online? Of course, someone could say, well, they're not online. Okay, then don't do it online. But if that's the goal, like, where are they? Is it Pinterest? If we're talking about people who like to knit and live in cold climes, maybe Pinterest is. I mean, who knows? Maybe Pinterest. If it's young people who live in large cities and often only connect to the internet with their smartphones, maybe it's Twitter. But you have to have a strong sense, and of course that will never be the general population. And then,
or the other example is people who you will only find if you show up at their doorstep.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, those in-person outreaches are just as, if not more valuable than this.
Yeah.
Visual stuff.
So you take those three questions and you say, okay, so my response is I'm going to tell them this, and this is where I'm going to do it, and this is how I'm going to do it, and this is how I will know within a few days if it's working or not, or how cost effective it is. And that's the rule. And it usually involves a lot of not doing other things. There's a vast amount of telling people that we can't do that thing they said we should do because it doesn't fit into what I just said. Because like so many things, so many technologies, so many cousins who work at startups, like find a way to push that.
Very good point. Any other questions? No? Okay. So I'll just put this slide back up, which is that if you want the slides or the video of this session, send a text message to this telephone number. It'll bounce back and ask you for your name and your email. And then we will send you an email in the next couple of days saying with the slides and the videos of all of our sessions today, except for the first one. Yeah. Thank you all for coming out.
The other ones too.
Yeah. Yeah. But do please tell us that you were here just so we know which session.
I just left my card.
Yeah. It goes into my database. and I send you my slides and my video, and maybe we talk sometime. I'm the one.
You won't sell it?
Oh, no, I don't sell it. Yes.
In 7 minutes?
Yes.
How long is it gonna
They're all in there.
Thanks, Charles.
Hopefully I won't lose my voice.